Okay, this week we are going to talk about psychosocial or social emotional development in ages 0 to 3. Some of the things we'll talk about are emotions, temperaments, and I'll define some social and emotional words for you. Then we'll go over some theories of social development, and I'll walk you through the steps of social emotional development for ages 0 to 3. We do know that really secure attachments with close adults is really, really important for our development and growth. Especially in the first few months, the first few years, you need to have really close bonds with a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, any kind of caregiver in your life. You need to be able to develop relationships with them. That's how we know children learn. There's a famous experiment that was done in the 1950s where they took a little monkey, I think it was a spider monkey, out of its monkey home, and they put it in a human lab, and they offered it 2 fake mom choices. So they made a mommy monkey, and they put milk in it, but it was just wire. It had like kind of creepy looking eyes, but that was how the baby monkey got a bottle of food. Or they made a monkey that was much more realistic. It was soft, it had fur, it was warm, and then they offered the baby monkey a choice. And it far and away always preferred the mommy monkey that was fake, but was warm and soft and had fur that kind of was similar to its own mother. So that kind of showed us and theorists in child development that it's more important the bonds that we have with the families around us, and having really secure relationships with people has a real impact on how we develop, and it's something that children need to have in order to be able to develop in all the other areas. I do want to go over some social and emotional definitions so that when I'm talking about this throughout the rest of the class, you have some information to draw on. So emotion is really just a reaction to an experience. It's very subjective, and it's very based on you as an individual, both the temperament that you're born with and then how your experience have shaped you to make you your own individual person. It's going to say how you react in a specific situation. So, in the spring, the movie It came out, and our reactions to that movie are really different. Some people laugh, some people think it's funny, some people were scared, some people scream, some people won't even walk into the movie theaters to see that movie. So our reactions to a specific stimulus in our environment is very subjective, and that really has to do with who we are as people. Then there's social emotions, and that's really something that we are comparing ourselves and our behaviors to actions in our community and our society. So how our society is set up, our social interactions are how we compare ourselves, and we compare our behaviors and emotions to other people and around us. Then we have psychosocial or social and emotional development. I'll use those words interchangeably, but they are the same. It's how we develop our social emotions, how we compare ourselves to others, and then how we are socialized across our lifespan. So I am only talking about child development, but there is lifespan development. And if you were to transfer to Cal State, there's a human development major where they do the lifespan as well, all the way from conception to old people, hospice, and dying. Socialization, though, is really also a process of development that is also through our lifespan. It's our skills, our values, our beliefs, our motives, our motivations, our habits that make us into, hopefully, responsible, productive members of community and society. So we are being socialized from the minute we are born to, hopefully, and to the best of our ability, be really good parts of our community. So our community and our society are imparting their values, and they're teaching us all of these types of things so that we can be socialized within our society. Then responsive caregiving, I'll talk about over and over again. Really what it is that an adult responds to a child's needs. When you're crying, I pick you up and I hug you. When you're hungry, I feed you. When you have a poopy diaper, I change it. When you're sad, I wipe away your tears. That is responsive caregiving. A child has a need, and I try to fulfill it to the best of my ability. Then attachment is just really the reciprocal, and that means both ways. So kind of a two-way street. All relationships are two-way streets. You give and you take. So it's a two-way street, which is an emotional bond between two people who contribute to the relationship. We are going to talk about temperament, and really temperament is a way of approaching and reacting to people, and they are most likely present from birth. So in my case, my 3 daughters, I have a feisty and 2 flexibles. With the flexible, it's very what you would call a good baby or an easy baby. We're trying to take away words that have values about it, and we're just saying flexible. But traditionally, when people ask, do you have a good baby or do you have an easy baby? It's a regular baby who has regular rhythms. They go to sleep easily. They wake up easily. They take their food. They're typically positive, smiling. They're easily adaptable to new routines. They're happy, they're sad, but they are not the highest highs to the lowest lows. They're generally an even keel kind of personality. Then we have our fearful. They adapt slowly and they withdraw a lot. They're typically kind of wary of new situations. They need a lot of exposure to things in order to gradually get used to it. So when there's changes in their routines or transitioning throughout the day from one thing to another, going somewhere, coming back, going to school, coming back, those types of things, they need a warning ahead of time, and then they need support throughout it because they're just a little bit hesitant and avoidant in new situations, and that's totally fine as well. That's just their temperament as well. Then we have feisty little ones as well. They're typically very active children and very intense. So they will be very joyful, they will be very angry, they will be very sad, they will be very frustrated. They're very intense people, most likely. They feel things very deeply, and they need to show and tell you those things as well. They're often very sensitive to things around them as well. They changes in their environment, like our fearful ones, or just things that are too bright, too loud, too soft, they are more aware of that than maybe a more flexible or a more fearful personality. They need time and warning as well for new routines and transitions. Once again, none of these temperament types are considered good or bad or better than the other. It's just the temperament that you are born with, and you could probably identify which one of these you were as an infant, or you could ask your mother or a family member what kind of baby you were, and that probably plays a lot into how you are now, because from the moment the child is born, they are reacting to their environment and they are interacting with people, and those people around them are interacting with that child. So it's a give and take relationship where the child changes the environment and the people around the child try to change the child as well. So it plays into us in our early experiences. We want to find a really good match between the child's temperament and their environment. And really, for our infants and toddlers, we're their environment. We're their families, their teachers, their caregivers, and then the sensory parts of their environment, when you hear, what you taste, what you smell, what you feel, is kind of sensory, using your 5 senses. And so that's all around us. So that can set off children that are maybe feisty, and then our changes, transitions, and routines as well are part of the environment. The biggest thing is that idea of responsive caregiving, that two-way street, that reciprocal relationship, that you have someone where each person gives and takes, hopefully not too skewed on one side, but at the end of the day, I am the adult. So I have the ultimate responsibility to change my behaviors to meet the needs of the child based on their temperament and their developmental stage. So having twins, one being flexible and one being feisty, I needed at the same time to kind of meet both of their needs that might be a little bit different, even though they were the exact same age and often the same developmental level. So sometimes that can be a challenge, knowing that one twin was going to need more transition help, more warnings, things like that, than maybe the flexible one would. And then on the other side, sometimes giving the flexible one a little bit more attention, because throughout the day, maybe the feisty one would have needed more support getting through changes and new things happening. So that was my responsibility as the parent, as the mother, is to be that person that meets the need of their child based on her temperament and their developmental stage. Because this class is all based around development, we'll be talking about things like fighting and terrible twos and how to school and adolescence and risky drug behaviors, things like that, that we all know that children kind of generally go through. And we need to change how we parent in each of those stages. You wouldn't treat an adolescent like a 2-year-old, or you wouldn't treat a 10-year-old like a newborn. As they grow and progress, we change our parent styles depending on what kind of developmental things they're going through. That's also how we teach children in a classroom. So at this age, they would be in a daycare, a child development center, or early start, Head Start. So in a classroom like that, where you have many children, the teachers have to be able to meet the variety of needs, and we have more individualized education. That's why ratios will be so small. We can't have 57 infants in one classroom with only 4 teachers. We keep the amount of children per teacher really low in order to be as individualized as possible for children that might have a wide variety of temperaments. I'm going to jump into our major theorists right now. Before this, we were talking about cognitive development, and I introduced Jean Piaget, a Swiss theorist who had ideas about how children learn in each stage cognitively, how they learn. Now we have somebody really similar named Erik Erikson, and he was a little bit younger, but he was a contemporary mostly of Jean Piaget. But instead of wanting to know how children learn cognitively, he wants to know how children learn socially and emotionally. So he has a bunch of stage theories. We're only going to do the first 5, the ones that actually relate to children. But if you were to look at all of the stages, he goes through all the way into birth. So what the stage I am is probably different than the stage that many of you are. You're in your 20s, where I'm, middle-aged. So we have different stages and different things that we're working on socially in those stages. So for our infants and toddlers, it's all about trust. So how Erikson breaks it down is in each stage you either learn something, or you're taught something, or you're socialized something, and if you aren't able to do that, then you develop another characteristic. So in this case, you develop trust, and if you aren't given the opportunities through great relationships to develop trust, then you might develop mistrust. So trust is really important. It's how we form attachments and relationships with people around us. Mistrust is also really important as well. It is kind of that gut feeling that protect yourself, that something weird has happened, I'm going to fight, I'm going to flight, I'm going to flee. So we kind of want to have both, but the most important thing is that that trust is really established. If you don't have somebody regularly meeting your needs, then you're going to view the world as scary, as unpredictable, as unforgiving. And throughout your lifespan, even into adulthood and beyond, you might struggle with forming really healthy relationships. So in the 1980s and 1990s, we were researching institutionalized children that were like basically in orphanages, primarily in Russia and in China. And we were noticing that in these large institutions, there were not enough caregivers to meet all of the needs of the infants and toddlers and preschoolers in these programs. They were huge places where children lived who had been abandoned or given up for adoption by their families. And so now we are seeing that those children who are now in adulthood are really struggling to form healthy relationships. If they're lucky enough, they'll be able to do therapy and go back and explore the issues of their childhood and understand that they didn't have their needs met, and that was a terrible thing that happened to them as a child, and that they're going to need to relearn how to form trusting relationships with other people. So what we need to give our infant toddlers is that we need to meet their needs. So when a baby cries, I pick it up and I cuddle it and I give it what it wants. I change its diaper, I feed it regularly and consistently so that they know when I have a need that needs to be met, this person near me is going to take care of me and take care of my needs. That is kind of the basics, the building blocks of our great relationships that we're going to have going forward through our lifespan. Then we have somebody else who also worked in attachment theory, and that is this man right down here, John Bowlby, down on the bottom right hand. He was a theorist in the 1900s, and during World War II in London, there was a lot of bombing by the Nazis. So the Nazis would fly planes over London and metropolitan areas, and they would drop bombs. There were a lot of casualties, and I actually did my master's program in London, and you can see where blocks had been demolished. So you'd have like a lot of rows of old houses, and then all of a sudden it would be like brand new, modern, like cinder block buildings from the 50s and 60s where they were trying to rebuild this because there was a lot of damage. In order to keep the children of these large cities, primarily London, as safe as possible, they sent them to farms. So they left their families, primarily their mothers. Their fathers were fighting in the war. They left their mothers and they went to farm families for the duration of the war in order to keep them safe. In the 50s and 60s, John Bowlby was noticing that there was some kind of kind of deranged children, they were calling them, children who had real social and emotional issues. And so he started doing studies on kind of if the parent-child or caregiver-child bond is broken or changed, or they don't have that attachment, it can lead to some issues. You can be avoidant or fearful or anxious or, you know, those types of things if that kind of parent-child bond is broken early on. Then one of his students, Mary Ainsworth, this woman right here at the top, she also studied it. And she was looking at different types of attachment. And that doesn't matter as much in this class. If you continue on child development, you'll learn more about it. But she went to different countries, Uganda, in Africa, China, and then Israel. And she was looking at kind of this strange situation test. So a child is taken to a room, an unfamiliar room they've never been to, and they're left there. The parent leaves, they go to another room, 5-10 minutes, and then the parent comes back. And that's what we're looking at, is when the parent comes back. So the child's in an unfamiliar environment, the parent comes back, what does the child do? Are they happy? Yay, mommy's back, and they run to their parent. That would kind of indicate to us a secure attachment. Do they not care? Are they scared of their parent? Or are they confused? Like they want to go to their parent, but they're not sure. They're trying to figure out what does my parent want? You know, are they happy this time? Or are they mad this time? You know, I never really know how my parent's going to be, so I'm a little bit confused. So I'm going to be hesitant and avoidant, and I'm going to check my parent out before I run to them to see what kind of mommy or daddy I have in this moment. So that was kind of her type of thing, is kind of how do we test attachment? How do we test the bonds between children? And then also how can we kind of quantify if something has gone wrong, what kind of issue is it? And how can we help the families kind of make good decisions in order to bring that attachment back? Now I'm going to go through psychosocial development. I did this the other week with our physical development, where I go through each age and I kind of tell you what each age will be a little bit like. This is very specific to our culture, like all things I'm talking about American culture, because we have certain societal ideas about how we want children to behave, and so we socialize them in that manner. For example, in Poland and Eastern European cultures, there is more priority on negative emotions, or what Americans would consider negative: sadness, melancholy, frustration, whereas in America, we're much more positive people. We're like smiling people. That's how we want our children to be. We don't want them to throw temper tantrums or be crying or anything like that. We want our children to be well behaved and as positive as possible. So in 0 to 3 months, their child is starting to look around, they're making eye contact, they're not as sleepy as when they were newborns. They have various states of arousal, though they're still sleeping quite a bit in the first couple months of life. But by 8, 10 to 12 weeks, they should be able to smile socially. Mommy, daddy, sister, brother, anybody very familiar in their life comes into the room, picks them up, smiles at them, they will smile back. It's a huge milestone for most parents that their child is now smiling at them. Previous to 8 weeks, they would smile, but it would be when they were asleep or they were farting or pooping or something like that. It had more to do with their bowels than it had to do with other people. So that's why it's such a nice milestone for parents to actually get a smile of recognition and joy when your child sees you. 3 to 6 months old, we're looking at smiling, cooing, laughing, and they are showing some emotions as well. Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they crying? Are they yelling? They're also exploring their environment. They are able to roll over, they'll start sitting up, those types of things. So they're not just being held or laid on the floor. They can be a little bit more mobile, or at least a little bit more interactive with their environment. They also might start to anticipate what happens. So I lift up a baby's shirt to give them raspberries, they're gonna start smiling right away. Then 6 to 9 months, they're babbling, ba 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 la la la, ga 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 ga. They're making sounds and they're babbling at people with the anticipation that you will babble back. They're playing social games like peekaboo, peekaboo. We talked about Jean Piaget earlier in object permanence. That's a big part of social and emotional as well. And then they're showing emotions like surprise, joy, frustration. Emotions are getting a little bit more refined. We're showing, instead of just anger, sadness, or happiness, we're now showing a little bit more varied emotions. They're also feeding themselves, as this little one is starting to tell us. Then 9 to 12 months, they're starting to crawl, they're starting to pull up, maybe even walk a couple steps. That type of early exploration is really important, that they're starting to be able to move around their environment, take things, mouth things, explore things. There might be the stranger anxiety, so they really want their parents or caregivers. They don't want people that are not unfamiliar to take them, and they might show low emotional affect. So for this, I always tell people about the Kardashians. The Kardashian sisters have incredibly low affect. So you'll see them talking and they'll be like, they really don't show like a lot of emotion on their face. Even when they're angry at each other, they'll be like, Kim, I hate you. You know, like it's really like very frozen face almost. I think it's just who they are. It's just a family characteristic that they might have because they all seem to kind of have it. But this is something that a kind of toddlers might show as well. It's kind of the RBF as well. It's just when something new is happening or they're outside in an unfamiliar environment, they're just kind of like looking at the world, but they're not really showing a lot of emotional affect on their face. They can be ambivalent about others or activities. You buy a toy, you think the child's going to really like it, and they don't care. They really like the box. It's a really typical thing that happens to most kids, especially like their first birthday. You spend all this money on a first toy or something when they'd rather play with the wrapping paper. And they might repeat an activity over and over and over again, or read the same book many times. That's a way that they're learning, by just constantly doing something, stacking blocks over and over again. Or my 1.5-year-old wants me to read this hippo book like 50 times a day. So we do, I change the words up to make it interesting to myself. 12 to 18 months, so that's 1 year to 1.5 years old. They're exploring their environment really enthusiastically as they're starting to walk or take their first steps. But I'm their base camp. Before they can go out and climb the Himalayas, they have a base camp, and that's me. So they toddle around, they explore their environment. Something spooks them or they need some support, they run back to their caregiver. They assert themselves, and like they're people, you know. All children are people. So they have needs, they have wants, they have desires, and they're trying to assert themselves and be able to tell you this. But along with that is that a lot of these decisions or things that they want to do are not rational. So there are things that we can let children do and things that we can let them explore. And then there are things that we can't let them do, like open up nail polish containers or eat, you know, sand at the beach after a rain when it's got pollution in it, that type of stuff. So that can cause a clash between parents and child. The child wants to explore, they want to broaden their horizons, and we want to encourage them to do that. But when they're safe or unhealthy, we have to stop them, and that can cause some friction between the child and the parent, and it might even lead to some temper tantrums. 1.5 to 3 years old, so 18 months to 36 months, children are now starting to play next to each other. They're doing what we call parallel play, playing next to each other, maybe communicating with gestures, maybe hitting or grabbing of toys. Once again, they have a lot of ideas about what they want, and they don't know that you shouldn't hit. They don't know that you shouldn't grab. So when it happens, we redirect them out of it. They might have some simple words that they can use with their peers as well, but a lot of it is really, really basic toddler behaviors with others. They also engage in pretend play, put a hat on, take a hat off, stir a cup, pretend to drink it, give it to mommy, pretend to blow up birthday candles. It's not really sophisticated play. They're not a doctor or a firefighter or something like that. They're just imitating what they see around us. That's how they're socialized at this age. They see mommy talking on the phone, they pick up a block, they pretend it's a phone. My 1.5-year-old has a little stroller. She puts her stuffed animal in it. She puts it around the stroller. She puts a little purse on her shoulder and she struts around, probably like she sees me doing. Sometimes she'll take out, she has a pretend play phone, and she'll like do this, and then she like texts as well, which is a little frightening that she is learning that socialization behavior from me and her family. I need to get off my phone more probably, but we see that they engage in this simple pretend play, which is kind of imitation of what they see. They can be anxious when they're dropped off. If I put them into childcare, they might be a little bit anxious when they're separated. But if they have a good bond with their teacher, it's only a couple of minutes that they're probably crying. Temper tantrums. So this is really common because of those things that I was just talking about earlier. They have needs, they have desires, they have this innate drive to explore their world, to see what's going on, to pick things up, to learn how things work. And we want to encourage that. We want children to learn by exploring and doing and playing. But at the same time, sometimes they make those decisions that are not rational. They're going to eat something gross. They're going to try to play with something that's dangerous, and we have to stop them. The biggest thing is that we know at this age that children are egocentric. So actually how their brains are functioning at this point, they are incapable of understanding that their parents or adults or their siblings have a perspective, a thought, ideas, or emotions. A child is only aware of themselves and what they think. We've done studies on it, we've studied their brain as well, and we know that they are absolutely incapable of this. Actually, until about 6, 7, 8 years old, that's when they can really begin to understand that other people have perspectives, they have emotions, they have beliefs of their own, and then they can start to be more empathetic and they can start to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. Our little ones don't have this ability, and that's why it can be a really difficult age to work with in the classroom, or it can be a difficult age to have at home. That terrible twos, those three-nagers, that type of stuff because there's lots of temper tantrums. Because they are egocentric, they don't understand that other people have perspectives, plus the desire to be more independent puts them at odds with the parents. The most important thing is that you have boundaries, so when things are safe or unhealthy, you take it away from them, you don't let them have it back, but you understand and you're sympathetic about it. So it's not trying to be overly harsh about it, just saying, I'm sorry, honey, you can't have the nail polish, and putting it up high where they can't get it, and then hopefully giving them something else to play with at all possible. And our under threes timeouts kind of don't really work. Sometimes a child just needs to get out of the situation that by making them really upset. But for the most part, they don't really understand that they've done something per se wrong. They're not going to really learn from it at this age. Their brains just don't have that ability. Redirecting them away from something that they're not supposed to have is going to be a lot more in tune with how they are developmentally. So if they are grabbing blocks away from friends, or they're throwing blocks, or they're hitting with blocks, take the child out of the block situation at mommy and me, or at a playground, or at a school, and you put them into the sandbox. So it's something different where they will hopefully be more engaged and have more appropriate behaviors, and they can be told what they did was wrong, but they're really not going to understand it, and timeouts are going to be really difficult for them. So the most important thing is that we are caring and we are understanding that children are going through kind of a weird developmental stage right now, and they need as much support as possible while we're keeping them healthy and safe with great boundaries. So infant toddlers is really kind of social development and socialization. It starts in infant toddlers and it lasts throughout our lifespan. So developing those close relationships with people who love and care for us is going to set us up for having these great trusting relationships that is going to last us through our lifespan. Our early experiences are really based on the response and the meeting of our needs that we get from our caregivers, and that really affects us as well. And what we need to do is we need to be responsive to them, and we need to create secure attachments and trusting relationships. All right, that's it for this lecture. I will talk to you guys again next week. Thanks so much. Bye.